was really bright. Welcome to biology. We have one more lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to give you an overview of what the animals are, and I'm going to start explaining to you what the project is that you're going to be doing as your last project. It's not going to be the final, it's going to be just a project for now, and then I'll talk about your final later. I'm not going to give you all of the parameters of that project yet. That'll be a separate Google post with like a rubric and what you have to do. But for now, this is going to at least explain what I'm looking for. Those of you who are in biology, this PowerPoint's going to look pretty similar. Same with those of you who are in zoology, although I did add a couple of things, remove a couple of things, because it's all relative to what we're doing for your project. Bio 2, you saw this in either zoology or Bio 1. So the project that you're going to do is we're going to talk about animals. And you're going to have to talk about an animal. Actually, you're going to write about an animal. Ooh, I should make it you talk too. Then I could see your little faces. I don't know. I haven't figured that all out yet. Let's talk about what an animal is. I'm going to move because now there's, I don't know what's there, an eagle on my face. I'm going to move over here out of the light. So first thing we want to talk about is all of the things that we're looking at are animals. And all of them are animals, meaning that they are all multicellular and they are all heterotrophs. That means that they are all going to ingest food one way or the other. Also, it is going to be that they don't have cell walls. Remember, the big thing with the plants, one of the big differences between a plant cell and an animal cell is having that cellulose inside of the cell wall. So animals do not have cellulose inside of their cell walls because they don't have cell walls. We then classify the animals into one of two groups. Vertebrates have a backbone. That's like that cute little baby or like you. Invertebrates don't have a backbone. All of the animals do ingestion. One of the big differences between you and a fungus is that you ingest your food. Fungi, I have a joke. Mushroom walks into a bar. Bartender says, "I don't serve your kind here." Mushroom says, "Why not? I'm a fun guy." Boom, boom. You're welcome, just in case you missed that. So anyway, fungi are multicellular heterotrophs that absorb their food. So they secrete digestive juices into the soil or onto your flesh if they're a flesh-eating fungus, and they're going to absorb the nutrients. That's different from you. You actually have to take food and put it inside of your body. For you, you start with mechanical digestion, where you start chewing your food, and then it mixes with saliva, and it starts the chemical breakdown of that food. With your saliva, it breaks down the carbohydrates into, what are the monomers of carbohydrates? Monosaccharides, very good. So it breaks those carbohydrates down into monosaccharides, and as it does that, it's going to then go through the rest of your esophagus into your stomach, where there are different peptidases. That's an enzyme that's going to break down those peptide bonds between the big proteins, and it's going to then continue to break down the fats, and it's going to then, as you're digesting it, then you absorb the nutrients internally, and then you excrete the waste products. And that is an animal characteristic, except for the sponges. All of the animals do reproduce sexually. Sometimes they're hermaphroditic, so that they're going to have both like eggs and sperm, but they are all going to have gametes, which are those haploid reproductive cells, and then those are going to unite to make a diploid zygote. Once you get that diploid zygote, that is what we would call a stem cell. Those stem cells then go through differentiation. We used to think that it was like this, where it's way up here at the top. I can't even tell, can't find my mouse. How many times do I have to yell, "Where's my mouse? Where's my mouse?" Still don't see my mouse. Oh, Lord Almighty. Still can't find it. I've been out for 6 weeks. It eludes me. There it is. Oh, you can't see it. Maybe. Up here. So, egg and a sperm unite. They start going through, what do you do to grow? What's that process? Mitosis. So it goes through mitosis till it becomes a ball of cells. Eventually that ball of cells starts to infold, and depending where that infolding happens, it's going to become different types of cells. And we used to think that those stem cells really just became the other types of cells based on where they were when infolding or gastrulation took place. In reality, we know that that's not on my next slide. there's like 220 different chemical signals that are going to cause those cells to become specialized. Once it's a specialized cell, so once it becomes a, what do I have here, a muscle cell, it can only remain a muscle cell. It can't become something else. It is differentiated, it is specialized. That's something we see in animals. The next thing, when we look at the animals, there's two main groups of the way that they develop. The first group are what we call protostomes. If you remember, proto means first or beginning, stome is referring to stomach. So these ones, or mouth, these ones only have one digestive opening. So they just have a mouth. Like you can't see it, it's a sponge. Sponges are going to, they're actually filter feeders. So water comes in through this big opening called the osculum, and then they filter out the food, and then they release their waste products through that, through the same osculum. That's different than same as a jellyfish, where it takes its food into its bell, digests it in the gastrovascular cavity, and then releases the waste products. That's different than you. You are what we call a deuterostome. Deuterostomes have two openings. They have both a mouth and an anus. Very similar to, where's the mouse? A worm. This morning, on my way in, it was raining, just a little bit, but on the sidewalk, I found a ginormous worm. And so I came in carrying this worm. I don't know if you can see him. There he is. I don't think he's faring so well. Oh, oh, nope. I think he's, oh, there he goes, he's a big one. Yes, I didn't kill him yet. Good, I'm gonna release him very soon. But this little guy is a deuterostome. He has both a mouth and an anus. And he is moving. He's trying to get away from this awful person that is me. Sorry, sweetie, I'm so sorry. I'll release you in a minute. But he's just moving, if you can see him wiggling. I saw Mr. Cage in the cafeteria. He had to let me in. And he was like, girl, what are you holding? Because I'm just like holding this worm in my hand. Then I delivered them cookies. But whatever. So, this is a deuterostome. He has both a mouth and an anus. What do earthworms eat, you ask? Dirt. My kid's been asking me that a lot lately. They take in the dirt, they filter out any of the nutrients that are in it, and then they release dirt as the waste product. I'm gonna put him down. I'm gonna name him Herb. I'm gonna watch Herb. I'm not gonna cover him up so that he's okay. We're chilling. You have a teacher who really hates worms, and she hates the smell of worms in the spring. And I'm not gonna tell you who it is because I think you might harass her, because I love to harass her with worms. It's a good time. I'll tell you next school year. I don't want video proof. When we look at the invertebrates do make up the biggest group of animals, like little Herb here. He's still wiggling, he's good. And they don't have a backbone. So it's things like the insects. That's really why it's the largest group, because there's so many different types of insects. Or things like the crustaceans or mollusks like a, clam, bees, spiders, horseshoe crabs, shrimp, scallops, all of the delicious things that come from the ocean, they are all invertebrates. That is different than chordates. So invertebrates, one big group. Then we have this group that are called chordates. You are a chordate. And those chordates, some of you just watched a video about chordates. Chordates have four characteristics. The first characteristic is what we call a notochord. And that notochord is just, in you, it becomes your backbone made out of bone. So you know that you have a spine made out of bone, and running through the middle of that spine is a nerve cord called the spinal cord. That spinal cord has nerves that are going to go all the way off from your spine through the rest of your body. It goes up to your brain to help process everything. And for you, that notochord, when you're developing in the womb, it's soft. It doesn't start out as a hard, thick bone. It starts out as this notochord. As you go through embryonic development, it then changes into a vertebrae. Same thing with your spinal cord. You don't start out with a spinal cord. You start out with a dorsal nerve cord. Dorsal is referring to where it's found. It's found in your back. That's your dorsal surface, like a dorsal fin on a fish. So for you, it becomes a spinal cord in your vertebrae made out of bone. In a shark, it becomes a spinal cord made that's housed inside of the vertebrae made out of cartilage. So this vertebrae can either be cartilage or it can be bone. but we have two groups that never happens in. This is what we call a tunicate, and sometimes it's called a sea squirt, and this is a lancelet. And I don't think you can pick up the coloring of the colorations that's on my board, but you'll see it when I attach the PowerPoint. They do have that dorsal nerve cord and the notochord, but they retain it through their entire lives. It never develops fully into a spinal cord, never develops fully into a vertebrae. So these two, and they're the only two like that, the tunicate and the lancelet, they are what we call invertebrate chordates. So that means that they are chordates. They have all four of these characteristics, but they never end up with a backbone made out of bone or made out of cartilage. Next are pharyngeal pouches. In you, that's going to become your lungs. In a fish, that's going to become their gills. Oh, look at that. The screen changes when I move. Woo! Cool. A post-anal tail is then, in you, your tailbone doesn't stay out. It curls under, and it doesn't feel real great if you hit it. So you have a tailbone. In some things like your cat or your dog, then it's going to have a tail that wiggles. So that's what that post-anal tail is. So all four of those things are used if you are a vertebrate. I'm sorry, a chordate. If you have a backbone that turns into bone or cartilage, then you're called a vertebrate. Other ways that we classify things, we classify them according to their body plan. So what does their body look like? Specifically, how can we divide their body? There are, when we look at symmetry, to do that. There are some things like the sponges that are asymmetric. So sponges are basically not animals. The only reason why we consider them to be animals is that they are multicellular heterotrophs that ingest their food. They don't really do the other stuff. They don't have symmetry. They don't really have a circulatory system. They don't really have much of the other stuff. But we have no place else for them. So they're going to stay in with the animals. So the sponges are the one group that are asymmetric. Some things show radial symmetry. So this would be like a sea anemone or a jellyfish. These are what we call the cnidarians because they have these specialized stinging cells on their tentacles. Jellyfish tentacles are down here. Sea anemone tentacles are up here. Fun fact, like in Finding Nemo, which Bio 1, you just watch that little segments of Finding Nemo. The clownfish, they live in the sea anemones and they get stung. So if you listen to the video or watch Finding Nemo, whenever Nemo goes against the anemone, you hear like a zzz sound. They're getting stung. It's not that they don't get stung. It's just that they go in and they take little pieces of those stinging cells and they take in those toxins and they use it to create their own, like anti-venom. So that's what, and they're specific to each sea anemone. So like Nemo can't go hang out in Bob the Clownfish's house because he would get stung. Okay, but these are all things, the cnidarians are the one group that have radial symmetry, like a radius or like a pie. You can cut them into a pie. That's different than you. So things that are radial have a top and a bottom, but they don't have a left and a right, like a pie. You are bilateral, bi means two. If I were to cut you in half like this, right down the middle, you would have equivalent segments on each side. They are not 100% equal. That's why we say equivalent, because sometimes like your heart's shifted over a little bit and like, what else? I don't know, your stomach's like not totally in the center, but they're equivalent. They're pretty close to each other. You are bilateral, bi, two, lateral, meaning to the sides. So I slice you right down the middle, that way you are bilateral. Whenever we look at things that have bilateral symmetry, we start to see something that's called cephalization. That was one of our vocab words. Cephal means head. So we start to see it in the flatworms, like this guy. This is just like a sea flatworm. And it does have bilateral symmetry. If I cut him in half this direction, we would have equivalent portions. But he does have a head. That means that he's going to move in a certain direction. He also has a little brain cluster. It's not a fully advanced brain like yours, but it's a nerve cluster that gives them a little bit. Herb is moving. Herb is on the move. He's trying to escape. Herb has bilateral symmetry. And where's Herb? There, we can get him good. So as Herb's trying to move, his little head is down here. He is moving in that direction. Come on, baby. There he goes. So he is moving in that direction. He's trying to feel things. He has a nerve cluster. He has a little bit more of a brain than that. It's called a platyhelminthes. It's a flatworm, but still not quite as advanced of a brain as you or I have, or this horse has. There you go, baby boy. It could be a girl too, so it could be Herbarina, but they're generally hermaphroditic, so it doesn't really matter. He's going to be Herb. Germ layers, having this, one of the other things we look at is how many cell layers are present. So in things like the flatworm, they just have a couple of cell layers present. A jellyfish, or the cnidarians, have 2 cell layers with jelly in the middle. You have lots of cell layers. You actually have what's called a coelom. That word is not coelom, it's coelom, and C-O-E-L was one of our root words right before we left, and it just means tube-ish thing. So what we can think of for you is if you're bilateral, so I cut you this way, where's something lighting? There we go, I cut you this way, you're bilateral. To see your coelom, I'd usually cut you at the waist. So I just take an axe, and I don't know how much force it would take to wield that axe, but I would take an axe or a sword through this. I have gotten really good at lightsaber fighting, so we'll do a lightsaber. So a lightsaber, I slice you like wong, right through the midsection. And when I do that, and I cut you open, and now there's 2 halves of you. You have a top half and a bottom half. You're a tube. You're a big tube of skin, and then there's smaller tubes. You have tubes for blood. You have tubes for digestion. You have tubes for respiration. You have lots of tubes. Everything stays inside of those tubes, and if it doesn't stay inside of those tubes, there's a problem, and you need to go to the doctor, because now you have internal bleeding. So you are what we call a coelomate. You have a coelom. Roundworms, which are the first group to have muscles like we have muscles, they don't have a true coelom. They have what's called a pseudocoelom. Things like the flatworms, just a couple of cell layers thick. Why am I telling you all this stuff? You don't need to know this for your test. The reason why I'm telling you all this stuff, because this is the stuff you're going to have to talk about in your animal project. Here's a good example. This is a midsection, so it would be like this if you can see it, like Herb. This is not Herb. I'm not going to do this to Herb. Full disclosure, I was totally going to dissect Herb whenever I came in this morning, but now I feel sad, and I'm not going to dissect him. So I'm not dissecting him. But anyway, so if we were to take Herb and cut him in half, then we would see this. He's a tube with other tubes. Here's an actual image of one. So he's a big tube of skin. There's some nerve clusters. There's some places for blood. It's all there. That's his body cavity. When we look at the invertebrates, most of them are radial, just because those are the things like jellyfish. The ones that are really good at moving, particularly moving on land, are bilateral. And when we see, like in Herb, we start to see that they have segmentation. And that segmentation is just those repeating body units. And we see that all the way through again until we get to humans with your vertebrae. Having that segmentation, having that coelom, or that fluid-filled cavity and everything kind of in those tubes, allows you for better movement. It's going to allow you to be able to just move on land better. Often they will have an exoskeleton. Oh, there's another picture. That exoskeleton they have to shed. The things that live on land and have an exoskeleton are limited. Because of that exoskeleton, or that outside skeleton, on land, it's kind of heavy to drag around their skeleton on the outside. An endoskeleton is a lot lighter. So things that have better movement on land can work a little better. They have a little better movement. Looking at respiration, sometimes they have gills. Sometimes they have lungs. In most of the invertebrates, they don't have lungs like we have lungs. They will have lung-like structures, like in a grasshopper. They have what are called spiracles, which are little like holes kind of on their bodies that they can breathe through. Another thing we see is open circulatory systems. So you have a closed circulatory system. We already said this. If your blood is not in your veins or arteries, there's a problem, and you have internal bleeding, you need to go to the hospital. Not in a grasshopper. In a grasshopper, they have a heart-like structure, they have veins, they have arteries, they are not all connected to each other. So the blood just kind of sloshes through their little bodies. I was also going to do a grasshopper dissection, but I haven't ordered grasshoppers in a lot of years, and they are really deteriorated, so no grasshoppers, it's just ooze inside of them currently. But if I had some fresh grasshoppers, you would see that. You would be able to see everything just kind of hangs out inside of their body. Perfectly fine if you live in the water or if you happen to not have a super huge body. If you have a large body and live on land, just because the atmospheric oxygen content is different, or oxygen content is different in the water than it is on land, things that have an open circulatory system can't grow super large on land. A lot of things have indirect development. We don't generally see that with vertebrates. That's where they have a larval stage, like a caterpillar, or maggots. My little neighbor girl, Gemma, was over the other day, and she was like, "What's this, Stacey? What's this?" And she like showed me, and she had picked up some maggots, and then she was like all grossed out. It was awesome. I loved her awesome. Sorry, fun story. Indirect development, you have a larval stage. Direct development, you don't. Humans do direct development. Yes, little babies at 13 weeks look like little aliens, but in reality, they actually have all of the same parts that you have. All right, we're getting close, I promise. Other things, an endoskeleton. We kind of already discussed that. That's where your skeleton is on the inside of your body, so that you're able to have a little better movement on Earth. That endoskeleton is covered by an integument, which is just your skin. So your skin is fine. You're not super hairy because we're humans and we don't have need for like full body fur anymore. But your dog has lots of fur all over his skin, or your cat, or a lot of the wild animals that live out. That's their covering. It's part of their protection. It's one of their homeostatic control mechanisms, meaning it helps keep them warm. Things like a amphibian have skin, but then they have a mucus coating, because their skin, if they just are out for a while, or like little herbs getting a little dry, they have to have like a waxy coating on them or a mucus coating on them so that they don't dry out. We stop seeing that in the reptiles. Reptiles have scales, amphibians do not. Reptiles can live without lots of water. They don't have to live in the water. They can live near the water or drink some water, but their skin isn't going to dry out because they have those scales. And lungs, we start to see real lungs. We start to see kidneys like we know them, and we start to see a highly organized brain. Humans, vertebrates, are not the first to have brains. They're the first to have a more advanced brain than the other ones. And that's direct development. All right, what's this project? You pick an animal. You can pick whatever animal you want to pick. I'm coming over here because I know there's no lighting. Pick whatever animal it is that you want to pick. It doesn't matter to me what animal you pick. You should pick an animal. If everybody ends up like with the same exact animal, then I'm going to know that you probably were like copying each other. I'm not a fan of that. Pick an animal. Pick an animal you want to learn about. Maybe it's your favorite animal. Maybe it's an animal that you think is weird and you know nothing about. Pick an animal. You just want to know about an animal. I'm sitting up on my tippy toes so that I'm lighted. Okay, with that animal, tell me its classification. What class is it in? What order? What family, genus, species? That's going to tell you a lot. That's going to tell you about their diet. It's going to tell you if they're a carnivore. It's going to tell you if they're an herbivore. It's going to tell you if they're more like you and you're a primate, or what it's like. So that's the first. Tell me its classification. I have here something special, like a special name. We are Homo sapiens. Homo means same, sapiens means wise. So Homo sapiens means wise like us. That's us. There are other different human-like things in the Homo species, so like Homo erectus, Homo habilis, but we are Homo sapiens, wise like us. If it has a cool name, tell me about its cool name. Some of them aren't super cool, like a cat is Felis catus. I think they just got lazy. I don't know. So whatever its name is, tell me about its name, because that's going to tell you a lot about what the animal does. Then you got to tell me about its symmetry. Is it asymmetric, radially symmetric? Does it have bilateral symmetry? Does it have pentaradial symmetry? The echinoderms, like a starfish or a sea urchin, they have pentaradial symmetry. Penta means 5. You can cut them into 5s. Then you need to tell me about its habitat and niche. So where does it live? Does it live in the water? Does it live on land? Does it live, what biome? So does it live in temperate deciduous forests, or tropical rainforest, tropical dry forest? Does it live in the taiga? Where does it live? And within that, what role does it play in its environment? Is it a decomposer? Is it a detritivore? Is it at the very top of the food chain? Is it a predator? What is it? Let me know that. Tell me what its predators are. Tell me what its prey is. Tell me, because these are all heterotrophs, so it's eating something, and even if that prey is grass, it's still prey. Where does it get its energy? So that's again the same thing. Is it an autotroph, heterotroph? Where does it get its food? What does it use for protection? So if it has some type of cool camouflage, it secretes toxins out of its skin, whatever it happens to do, make sure you put that in there. Let's see what else. I can't read it backwards. Advancements. Ooh, here's where we get into it. What are some of the things, how do they overcome some common problems like water loss? So we talked about that just now with the amphibians. Amphibians have a mucus coating on them so that they don't dry out. Reptiles have scales. You have skin. What's that? What about respiration? How do they get their oxygen? Because they're all heterotrophs, they are all doing cellular respiration. In order to do cellular respiration, you have to have oxygen. You have to take in glucose and you have to take in oxygen. So where do they get their oxygen? What advancements do they have for their oxygen? Same with circulation. How do they get that oxygen through their body? Tell me, what is it? Is it open circulatory, closed circulatory? Tell me about their circulatory system. Does it have a 3-chambered heart, a 4-chambered heart? Nothing has a 5-chambered heart. 2-chambered heart, not even a real heart, and just some aortic ventricles or something. Tell me what it has. Tell me again about its digestion. That can all kind of be tied in together. Tell me what it's eating, where it's finding that food. Tell me how it reproduces. Reproduces on land, reproduces in the water. It does internal fertilization, or it does external fertilization. Tell me how it reproduces. They're hermaphrodites, whatever it is. Tell me about their reproduction. And then something cool. Why did you pick your animal? Why do you really like them? My favorite animal, if you watched that other video a couple of days ago, is the jellyfish. I love jellyfish because the little teeny tiny ones have the super strong venom and they can kill you. And they're incredible. They don't have a brain, they don't have anything, but they have those nidocytes that can just zap you and kill a full-grown man in minutes. That's what I think is cool about them. Tell me about whatever unique, cool thing it is that your animal does. Tell me about that. I think that's it. We'll go back there so there's light. Okay, so that was a brief 28-minute lecture on animals and kind of an overview of what your big assignment for the end of the year is. Again, I'll let you know what's happening with the final. As soon as I get some more definite word from Mr. Robinson, I will let you know. I'm going to attach to the Google Classroom for the assignment for the next 2 weeks an actual rubric with all of the stuff that I just explained. If you get to the point and you're doing your project and you're not sure what I mean, rewatch this video, shoot me a message, and I will hopefully explain it for you a little better. Next week, we meet Tuesday, Thursday on Google Classroom Hangout. Please bring your questions then. You might have questions that anybody else has. And we will be doing 12 to 2 because nobody wakes up for the 10 o'clock one. So 12 to 2, Tuesday, Thursday, next week. There's that. Mrs. Cochran's been doing a Pilates class on Thursdays at 10. It is quite delightful if you have not done that yet. You can turn off your camera so that nobody sees you doing it. I did it yesterday, super relaxing, let me suggest that. Keep sending me your memes, keep watching any of the videos. I miss you. I can't wait to see you again whenever that is. Have a great weekend.